If you can go someplace friendlier where you feel more respected, that's great, but it often isn't an option. And if it isn't an option, just be cool, man.
That's the technical legal term
That's the
for it.
technical
Just
legal
chill,
advice.
bro.
Just be cool about it.
We are the Armed Attorneys. Today we're answering one of the most frequently asked questions we receive, and that is, can my employer prohibit me from carrying? Now, there's a little bit to this. There's two different, I guess, paths we can go down. We're going to talk about both of those, but before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And this is, all right, first off, there's kind of two different areas. Let's start with that. The workplace, vehicle. We'll talk about those two. Civil, criminal. I think those are important. I think the most important one to start with, though, is probably criminal.
Criminal. So the question is, can your employer make it a crime if they tell you not to carry into work and you do so? And generally, the answer to that is no.
Yeah, the answer is unless you're a statutorily prohibited location. Let's say you work in a
Courthouse.
elementary school. Yeah.
Elementary school.
Yeah, think about those locations that are statutorily prohibited by your state's law. All right, well, yeah, those aren't a crime because your employer says they are. They're just statutorily prohibited. But absent that, can an employer say it is a Class A misdemeanor to carry into my business?
Absolutely not. Now, trespass laws aside.
Yeah.
Correct. So if there is, and every state's law varies, but if there is a solid criminal penalty for trespassing, if warning is given correctly, potentially, right?
Yes.
Although you don't see it.
Yeah, so the question then becomes is, are you on notice that entry into this location with a firearm is prohibited? At that point, yeah, that could be trespassing. Your state's trespass laws are going to vary. Your notice provisions are going to vary. And so if you're placed on notice, maybe it's a crime. But generally, I'll say we don't see that very often. And the one place that we see carved out is vehicles.
Correct. And so we have this issue of, do you, like, let's say you work at the, I don't know, give me a location, the Walker Taylor Law Office in Houston, Texas. And for some reason, instead of saying, bring your guns in here, we say, absolutely not, you can't carry inside.
Edwin holding his pearls.
Oh, I know, right? He walks in with his sword instead.
Yeah.
What happens to the employee parking lot? And the answer, almost universally across the board, state by state, is absolutely nothing. Your car is your car. And so not only can we not make it a crime to have that gun in your car, like, I mean, what lots of states, and Texas included, have certain protections for your car in the parking lot, such that, you know, you are supposed to be exempted from penalty across the board.
Yeah, so what does that look like? And again, your state, check your state's law to make sure you have this. But what we see pop up over and over again is, hey, if you are legal to carry, or maybe you have to be a license holder, keeping a concealed firearm in your locked vehicle, even if it's on employer, we won't use the word premises, but property, let's think a parking lot outside the business, that it would be a violation of state law to impose as a condition of employment, hey, you can't keep guns in your car. So if an employer were to fire you because you lawfully kept a gun in your car when you had one of these states' laws, maybe you have a wrongful termination?
Maybe, although I will say Texas has exactly such a law, but there is no teeth to the law, meaning employers violate it all day long, and there is not any real way to punish them for it. So that's unfortunate. You may be in a similar situation, or hopefully your state's law is written a little bit better, and there is some penalty for violation.
And I'll say the compounding part of this, and maybe your state's law does have teeth, here's where maybe it gets neutered just a little bit. If you live in an at-will employment state where employers can hire and fire people for any legal reason, you know, not because of your age, not because of your sex or your religion, but if they can fire you for pretty much any reason, then what we see is a lot of employers kind of skirt this rule by saying it's performance related or no reason given.
Right. Reduction in force.
Yeah.
Right. That's always when they really just want to fire you, even for something that's discriminatory, they always say reduction in force.
Yeah, this happens probably a couple of times a year. I have a guy gets fired because employer was somehow came to their attention that there was a firearm in their car, even though Texas law prohibits it. You know, they just say fired, no reason specified.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? You don't really have any remedy.
Yeah. Performance
performance.
Right. And it doesn't even have to be that. I mean, because most states are employment at will. They could be like, you wear too many red shirts, you're fired. I mean, really, I mean, it is that wild west out there. So it really is, it's a tough road.
So we see, all right, criminal, statutorily prohibited. Look out for that. Are you on notice that entry with a firearms prohibited? Maybe it's a trespass, but in a lot of circumstances, no, that's not going to be an issue. We see our vehicle protections, parking on premises protections. Maybe there's no teeth to that. But I will say what we see in virtually every single state, including the state of Texas, employers can prohibit employees from carrying inside the premises for civil, employment purposes.
Sure. What if your workplace is your vehicle?
Ooh, interesting question. Well, let's say you have a company car. Again, we see rule again, every state will vary, but generally employers could keep you from carrying inside of a company vehicle. And we're not talking about the criminal stuff. We're talking about the civil stuff. Hey, my employer told me you are fired for carrying in a company vehicle. Is that allowed? Most states are going to say yeah.
Right. But you get pulled over for speeding in the company vehicle. Police somehow discover there's a firearm in there against your employer policy. Are you going to be charged criminally? No.
No. Now, I guess it raises an interesting question. Hey, we hate that these two things, being able to defend yourself, being able to put food on the table for your family, kind of hate that these two things are tied together. Unfortunately, employers, they got a lot of power in this arena. Maybe it's not criminal, but they could terminate your employment contract. What is your advice for folks who maybe don't want to be put in a defenseless situation?
I know. I hate that. Mostly I tell people to lie. I mean, because when people say, look, I'm really happy with my employment. I love my employer. I love my salary. My job is great, except that I read through, our manual. The manual says no carry. The manual says no guns in the parking lot. The manual says blah. Generally, I tell people, and they're like, well, I want to approach HR about it. And I want to have a reasoned discussion about why that's unsafe and about why I think my Second Amendment rights should be protected and about why, look, I have a license. I'm blah, blah, blah. Let me do this. And I tell people, nobody talks, everybody walks. Just don't be an idiot. Don't flaunt it. Keep yourself safe and know that if they discover you, there is a good chance they're going to fire you. But maybe if it's just written in your employment manual, maybe they're like, you know what, maybe you didn't see this. This is our policy. Don't do it again. Whereas if you go to HR and HR explicitly tells you no, which they will, as HRs want to do, and then you do it anyway, they're definitely going to fire you because you were 100% on notice and they're going to be mad about it.
Yeah, and that's assuming not a statutorily prohibited place. You're not on notice that entry is prohibited.
Caveat.
But yeah, the ask for forgiveness as opposed to permission, I would say that's an important point. And then I'd say the second point is maybe you work at a place that allows carry.
Yes, that is, but not everybody, I mean, a good job's a good job, and that's like, I definitely recommend that to people as well. Sometimes if you can go someplace friendlier where you feel more respected, that's great, but it often isn't an option. And if it isn't an option, just be cool, man.
That's the technical legal term.
That's the technical legal advice, bro. Just be cool about it. But I mean, I think we talk about things that are protected, right? Protected reasons for firing. Richard mentioned, we're talking about your sex, your age, your religion, your nationality, your race.
But guns are my religion.
Well, I think that begs the question, right? Why isn't the Second Amendment one of those things you can't be discriminated against for? And I mean, I will say, although I don't like it, it falls in line with other jurisprudence. Like if I say something that my employer doesn't like, there's no, unless my employer is the government, and then there's even exceptions there, like my employer can be like, hey, you, like the shit posting on the Facebook you've been doing makes us look bad. You're fired.
Yeah. Right? I mean, the government can't restrict that viewpoint discrimination. Individuals, entities, yeah. And then I'll say the kind of two last issues that come up are, all right, maybe I got this thing in an employee handbook. Hey, no weapons on premises or inside of the building. Self-defense situation arises. Do you lose your right to self-defense? All right, that's kind of first issue.
That's a good question, yeah.
And then I'll say the one kind of remaining point that I think a lot of people ask is, all right, I have this line in my employee handbook, no weapons inside the building. But we agree, not a statutorily prohibited place. I'm not on notice for trespass. This is just a term of my employment. self-defense situation arises in the workplace, do I lose my right to self-defense?
No, no. I mean, first of all, even if you were, working in a courthouse, carried into a courthouse, had to use self-defense there, you still get to defend yourself.
Right.
Right. You don't have to just die because you were doing something you weren't supposed to do. And then the issue becomes, and Richard gave the caveats in a very specific way, because the issue becomes, have you done something which might disqualify some of your legal presumptions in self-defense, or have you not? But you still get to defend yourself. The issue is, what is going to happen in front of your jury based upon what your notices were and things like that.
Right, because let's say, all right, you are in a place that you're not legally allowed to be. Well, maybe you have a legal duty imposed on you to retreat. We know about some crazy restrictions in other states where it's like you have to take all steps necessary to terminate the contact with the person, or give the person a warning. Or I've seen all these other kind of crazy little factors out there, but yes, maybe there are some additional duties placed on you. Do you lose your right to preserve your own life? Absolutely not.
No. And, I will say I did have this happen once, if you recall. It wasn't an employer situation.
Okay.
But I had somebody lose their stand your ground because they were in a place where they weren't allowed to have their gun.
Okay.
And then they shot a prominent lawyer in town over a parking spot.
Sure.
And then they lost stand your ground because they were committing a crime for having the gun in the post office parking lot. Don't do that.
Right. But that's the criminal.
That's the criminal.
Like if there's a criminal penalty imposed, that's a good indication. All right, this is going to, you don't lose self-defense, but this could affect my self-defense rights.
Right. So rare. That's if you work in an elementary school, you bring your gun to the elementary school, you have to use self-defense. You might be looking at some pretty hefty uphill battles in your self-defense. However, it does not mean that you wouldn't be acquitted of a good self-defense case.
Yeah.
But it does increase your battles.
And then a question I think comes up all the time, I don't have a good answer for you, is all right, my employer has disarmed me. Do they have a legal duty to protect me? Are they liable if something happens to me? I think there's some good arguments there, but we just don't have any clear answers.
Right. And it is a patchwork across the country. Some places try to legislate that. Some places have some case law, which might suggest that there are some legal duties to protect or not. Check your state's law. But I will say, most people sitting here watching us, there is not going to be any real duty imposed. I mean, the general duty is to keep you safe, right? But just saying no guns and then not providing security, most states are not going to ding your employers for that in terms of your future negligence action for wrongful death or, your personal injury.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.